The fourth round missed the steel plate and struck black basalt 6 feet to its right. A pale burst of stone dust lifted above the flooded range, hung in the morning heat, then vanished against the ridge. Inside the observation shelter, for impact marks glowed on the digital scope in a pattern too clean to be random. "Hold 6/10 left," Keira Solano said. No one answered her. Across 2,863 meters of shallow water, exposed mud, and fractured volcanic rock, the target remained untouched inside a narrow recess on Basalt Ridge. The sniper team had changed wind calls 3 times, adjusted elevation twice, and replaced the spotter behind the glass. Every correction had moved the reticle, yet every round had missed along the same angular line. "The wind is folding behind the ridge," Commander Grant Halvorsen said. He stood behind the firing team with his arms crossed, his field jacket immaculate despite the wet gravel underfoot. Keira watched the heat shimmer above the basalt and the cooler air sliding over the basin, but neither explained the fixed spacing between the impacts. Wind errors wandered. These did not. "It isn't the wind," she said. Halvorsen turned just enough to see the laminated archive badge clipped to her chest. Range maps and records appeared beneath her name, followed by a classification code most operators never bothered to read. She held a canvas tube containing survey overlays requested by the safety office, and to everyone near the rifle, that made her a courier with an opinion. "Petty Officer Solano," Halvorsen said, "deliver the maps and remain behind the control line." The spotter kept his eye against the optic. 2 senior chiefs glanced at Keira, then away, unwilling to challenge the commander during a formal evaluation. Near the lower access road, a telemetry crew moved between orange markers toward an antenna station whose signal had failed 20 minutes earlier. "The error is constant," Keira said. Halvorsen looked back toward the ridge. "Basalt does not produce constant conditions." He tapped the range card fixed beside the rifle and ordered another atmospheric update. The technician read out pressure, temperature, humidity, and a crosswind that had weakened by nearly 3 knots since the first shot. The ballistic computer produced a new solution. Keira looked from the screen to the old survey tube in her hand. "The solution changed," she said. "The impacts didn't." This time the spotter lifted his head. Halvorsen did not. He called Basalt Ridge unshootable terrain, loud enough for every evaluator in the shelter to hear, converting 4 unexplained misses into a verdict that protected the team and the man who had certified the range. Then he ordered a 5th round chambered. Keira moved to the map table and unfastened the canvas tube. Inside lay a transparent survey sheet dated before the basin had flooded, its grid lines faded but intact. She placed one corner over the current range map and saw 2 control points refuse to meet. 0.6 of a mil separated them. On the firing line, the bolt closed. Downrange, the telemetry crew stepped into the corridor the new map called safe. Keira pressed both layers flat and realized the next miss would not strike empty stone. Keira reached the range phone before the trigger broke. The handset was older than the digital console and connected to the maintenance channel rather than the command net, but the telemetry crew carried receivers keyed to both. She pressed the transmit switch and gave the corridor number, the control point designation, and one instruction. "Stop where you are." Static swallowed the first second. A relay icon blinked amber, showing a 2.3-second communications delay through the damaged antenna. On the far side of the flooded basin, the 2 technicians continued down the access road, unaware that the 5th firing solution intersected the ridge above them. Halvorsen turned from the rifle station. "Who authorized that transmission?" Keira kept the handset raised until the reply arrived. One technician answered from beside marker 12, his voice clipped by interference. They had halted 38 meters short of the basalt shelf. The range safety officer, Lieutenant Masonville, checked the crew's position against the current map and found them outside the marked danger boundary by more than 60 meters. "They are in a safe corridor," he said. "Not on the original survey," Keira replied. Halvorsen crossed to the map table and saw the transparent sheet beneath her hand. The paper map below, it had been printed after the spring flood, when the basin rose 11 feet and swallowed 3 concrete reference posts. The overlay came from an earlier survey, its corners worn white and its ink softened by years in a flat file drawer. Two grid intersections nearly aligned. Nearly. Halvorsen lifted the transparency before Vel could examine it. This survey is obsolete. He rolled it once, too tightly, and placed it beside Keira's canvas tube. Around them, the evaluation resumed its practice motion. The spotter recorded the canceled shot. The ballistic technician recalculated for a surface temperature of 34 degrees Celsius, a cross-basin wind of 8.6 knots, and a ridge slope averaging 17 degrees near the target recess. None of those figures explained why 4 separate corrections had produced the same fixed displacement. Keira asked to see the certification date on the current map. Halvorsen answered by turning the map face down. Your assignment is archival control, not fire direction review. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. 2 evaluators removed their headsets and studied their tablets, making it clear they would not become part of the disagreement. A chief petty officer collected Keira's canvas tube and set it near the shelter entrance, as though clearing an obstruction. The dismissal was administrative, almost courteous, and therefore harder to challenge. Keira stepped back from the table. Her pulse sat at 74, higher than normal, but steady enough that she could count the intervals between the broken telemetry bursts. Every 6.8 seconds, the damaged relay repeated the same identification tone. The tone arrived late, but the technician's coordinates did not change. The map was telling the command team they were safe. The terrain was saying otherwise. Vel approached her without looking directly at the disputed overlay. You stopped a live evaluation on an unverified assumption, he said. Give me something I can enter in the range log. Keira pointed toward the eastern bank, where a yellow survey marker leaned above the waterline. On the current map, that marker stood 21 meters farther north. Vel raised binoculars, checked the shoreline, then compared it to the grid printed on his tablet. For the first time, uncertainty entered his posture. Halvorsen saw it and ordered the 5th firing sequence postponed for exactly 4 minutes while the telemetry crew cleared the lower road. He framed the pause as a communications precaution, not a mapping concern. Then he handed the transparent survey to the records chief. Tag this for disposal after the evaluation. As the sheet changed hands, Keira noticed a red routing stamp on its lower edge, Halvorsen's. Office had received the same survey discrepancy 11 days before the range was certified. Keira did not challenge the disposal order. She asked the records chief for the routing log attached to the transparency, because archival property could not be destroyed without a chain number. The chief hesitated, then scanned the red stamp with a handheld reader. A partial entry appeared, survey exception, control points B3/B4, for command review. The rest of the note was restricted behind Halvorsen's office credentials. That did not prove the current map was wrong. It proved only that someone had raised the question before the range was certified. Keira needed a fixed reference that the flood could not have moved. The eastern shoreline marker was useless by itself. 11 feet of new water had softened the bank, shifted sediment, and changed the visible edge of the basin. Even the old transparency might contain a drafting error. She walked to the shelter's rear window and searched the basalt face through a compact monocular until she found a square survey plate bolted into exposed bedrock above the floodline. Its stamped identifier, B4, matched the warning entry. I need the coordinate history for B4, she told Lieutenant Vel. He looked toward Halvorsen, then back at the ridge. You have 4 minutes. The archive terminal took 26 seconds to load the pre-flood survey and another 12 to retrieve the emergency remap completed after the basin rose. Keira compared the 2 records. B4 had not moved. Its latitude and elevation were identical in both surveys, but the post-flood map plotted the target recess from a replacement control point designated B4 R, 21 meters north and 1.7 meters lower. The change was legal only if the replacement point had been field verified against the original plate. No verification certificate appeared in the file. Keira ran the angular difference across the recorded distance of 2,863 meters. The result was not exact. Water refraction, slope notation, and the map's rounded grid values left a margin. It fell between 0.56 and 0.63 mil, close enough to explain the fixed impact pattern. Not enough to accuse anyone of falsification. Suspend fire until B4 is validated, she said. The target grid may be displaced 0.6 in azimuth. Halvorsen had returned to the firing station. The wind had dropped to 6.9 knots. The basalt surface temperature had climbed to 36 degrees Celsius, and the fifth round remained chambered under hold. He listened without interrupting, then asked one question. Do you have a signed invalidation of the current map? No, a failed field verification? No certificate at all. Then you have an absence, not evidence. He ordered the telemetry crew to continue clearing the lower route and instructed the firing team to prepare as soon as they reported beyond marker 14. Vel entered Keira's warning into the range log, but labeled it an archival discrepancy pending confirmation. The phrase reduced an angular error near 0.6 mil to a paperwork concern. Keira checked the maintenance channel. The relay delay had widened from 2.3 seconds to 3.1, and one technician reported rising water across the detour road. Their GPS packets arrived irregularly, each one several seconds older than the voice call attached to it. On the command display, their icons appeared safely beyond the corridor. On the raw telemetry, the coordinates lagged behind their actual movement. Keira requested the unsmoothed position feed. The communications operator denied access because her archive profile did not carry live range permissions. Halvorsen approved the next firing window for 90 seconds after the crew's final call. Then the older technician transmitted a brief correction. Marker 14 was underwater, so they were using the basalt shelf above it. Keira looked at the current map, then at the old transparency waiting in the disposal tray. The shelf lay directly beneath the line the map had shifted north, and the command team was about to treat a delayed coordinate as a confirmed safe position. The command display marked the telemetry crew clear at 10 hours, 42 minutes, and 16 seconds, but the packet timestamp in the lower corner read 10 hours, 42 minutes, and 11 seconds. Keira saw the 5-second difference before Lieutenant Vel did. The relay delay had widened again. The technicians had abandoned the flooded road, and their last reported position placed them somewhere along a basalt shelf that the current map shifted 21 meters north. That position is stale, Keira said. Vel leaned over the console and found the timestamp. He reached for the range hold switch, but Halvorsen had already authorized the firing sequence through the secondary panel. The shooter settled behind the rifle. Wind crossed the basin at 7.4 knots. The rock face measured 38 degrees Celsius, and heat shimmer bent the target recess into a wavering gray slit. Halvorsen called the conditions acceptable. Vel ordered a temporary hold. For half a second, both commands existed on different channels. Then the shooter, hearing Halvorsen first, pressed the trigger. The rifle's report struck the shelter and rolled over the water. Nothing happened at the ridge. At 2,863 meters, the round needed several seconds to cross the basin, and those seconds stretched longer than the arguments that had preceded them. Keira watched the basalt shelf instead of the target plate. For seconds passed. 6. Near 8. A pale flash appeared below the recess, followed by a fan of stone dust that drifted downslope. The shot had clipped a projecting ledge. A moment later, the telemetry screen collapsed into static. The lower relay vanished, the crew icons froze, and an alarm indicated loss of the eastern antenna. No injury signal appeared, but no voice response came either. Halvorsen demanded a status check. The communications operator called twice and received only the 6.8-second identification tone, now broken into uneven fragments. Vel shut down the firing circuit and removed the authorization key from the console. Range is cold until we have positive contact. Halvorsen objected that the impact had landed inside the approved sector, but the sector existed only on the disputed map. Keira opened the old survey file and traced the basalt shelf from B4 to the antenna platform. The ricochet path could not be confirmed from the camera angle, and she refused to pretend otherwise. "I can't tell you where the fragment went," she said. "I can tell you the shelf is inside the displaced corridor." That distinction mattered. She was not claiming certainty where none existed. She was identifying the risk Halvorsen had certified away. The rescue vehicle could not use the flooded access road, and the northern track crossed an unstable slope measured at 22 degrees after the last washout. Vel asked Keira whether the old survey showed another approach. She compared 3 map editions, rejected one route because the contour intervals had been generalized, and found a maintenance spur ending 70 meters below B4. It was slower but remained outside both the current and original danger boundaries. "Use the western spur," she said. "Confirm the plate before climbing." Vel dispatched the recovery team and logged her recommendation under his own authority. Halvorsen began dictating an incident summary that described the antenna failure as environmental damage. Keira heard him omit the stale coordinates, the delayed relay, and her suspension request. She did not interrupt. She photographed the range clock, copied the packet timestamps, and recorded the exact moment the firing authorization appeared on the secondary panel. 12 minutes later, the recovery team reached the technicians. Both were unhurt, but the ricochet had shattered the antenna housing less than 9 meters from their position and driven them behind a basalt fold where the radios could not reach. Relief moved through the shelter without celebration. Vel looked at the frozen map icon, then at Halvorsen's unfinished summary. The crisis had passed, but the explanation Halvorsen was building would erase the decision that caused it. And Keira now knew the map error was no longer the only thing being concealed. The recovery team brought both technicians into the shelter at 11:18, wet to the knees and carrying the broken antenna housing between them. A crescent-shaped strike marked one side of the aluminum frame, while basalt dust covered the cable ports and the orange identification panel. Lieutenant Vel photographed the damage, sealed the firing console, and told Halvorsen that the range would remain cold until the coordinate discrepancy could be tested independently. "Then test it," Halvorsen said. He expected the answer to require survey crews, replacement markers, and several days of delay. Keira asked for the raw impact record from all 5 rounds, the pre-flood elevation sheet, and the current optical image of the steel plate. She did not ask for authority over the firing line. She asked Vel to choose a cleared calibration point with no personnel, equipment, or access route behind it. The only acceptable option was the original target recess at 2,863 meters, now visible through a thinning layer of heat shimmer. The basin wind had fallen to 6.2 knots, the air temperature had reached 31 degrees Celsius, and the basalt surface held nearly 40. None of those values had remained constant during the morning, yet the 5 misses still formed one narrow angular band. Keira plotted their relationship to B4 and found the displacement tightening around 0.59 mil. The rounded map scale made the 600th uncertain. "I can demonstrate the grid error," she told Vel. "I cannot promise a perfect strike under changing conditions." The admission made him trust the proposal more, not less. He ordered a separate range check, confirmed the technicians were behind the protected western boundary, and assigned an independent spotter to the optic. Halvorsen objected when Keira moved toward the rifle, not because regulations barred her, but because nothing in her visible assignment explained why she handled the weapon with familiar restraint. She checked the chamber, the mounting points, and the recorded 0 without commentary. Her pulse read 69 on the medical sensor clipped to the evaluation vest, steady but not unnaturally low. She studied the ridge for almost a minute, then removed the sequence of wind corrections the team had layered onto the original solution. What remained was a clean map problem distorted by repeated attempts to solve it as weather. "Correction?" Vel asked. 6/10 right from the current grid. Halvorsen stepped closer. "That contradicts every adjustment made this morning." Keira settled behind the optic. Those adjustments were chasing the impacts. The independent spotter confirmed the target plate, the protected corridor, and the empty shelf below it. Vel authorized one round. Keira waded through 2 cycles of shimmer, not searching for a perfect atmosphere, only a stable one. The shot broke without ceremony. Its sound crossed the shelter instantly, but the ridge gave nothing back. 3 seconds passed. 5. At nearly 8, the steel plate moved inside the basalt recess, and a flat metallic report returned across the basin a moment later. The impact sat slightly low of center, but fully inside the scoring surface. No one treated it as magic. The spotter checked the image twice. The technician replayed the time-stamped feed, and Vel compared the recorded correction to the old transparency. Keira cleared the rifle and stepped away before anyone could turn the result into a performance. Halvorsen called it a favorable wind window. Vel answered by displaying all 6 impacts on one screen. 5 clustered misses under changing weather. Then 1 confirmed strike after a 0.6 mil coordinate correction. Keira had not proved every part of the map was wrong, but she had proved Basalt Ridge was not unshootable. And Halvorsen now had to explain why the correction matched a discrepancy his office had received 11 days earlier. Halvorsen ordered the old transparency removed from the shelter before the replay had finished. He called it contaminated reference material, argued that Keira had built her correction around an obsolete grid, and told the record's chief to complete the disposal tag immediately. Lieutenant Vel stopped the chief at the door. Nothing leaves until the incident package is sealed. The transparency remained inside its canvas sleeve while the 6-shot record, communications log, and damaged antenna were transferred to a temporary evidence table. Keira did not claim the single hit proved deliberate misconduct. A 0.6 mil correction at 2,863 meters established that the active grid was displaced near the target recess. It did not establish who knew, when they knew, or why the range had opened anyway. She asked the archive terminal for the document history attached to control points B3, B4, and B4R. The system returned 3 routine revisions, 1 unresolved exception, and a missing attachment number. The missing item had been routed to Halvorsen's office 11 days before certification, then marked closed by command review, without a surveyor's signature. That can happen during file migration, Halvorsen said. Keira checked the metadata rather than answering. The closure had been entered at 1842 from a workstation assigned to his executive office. 6 minutes later, the revised range map had been approved for operational use. The following morning, the original transparency had been moved from active survey storage to archival disposal. The sequence was suggestive, but still incomplete. Vel asked whether the warning itself could be recovered. Keira explained that the attachment had not been deleted. Its index link had been removed. Restoring it required records authority she did not possess. Halvorsen objected before Vel could respond, stating that restricted command files could not be opened by an archive clerk during a field evaluation. Vel entered his own credentials and found that his safety profile was also blocked. The restriction had been added under a command-level retention code normally used for personnel investigations, not mapping disputes. That changed the room more than the successful shot had. The records chief retrieved the paper routing jacket from a locked cabinet and placed it beside the transparency. A faint pressure mark showed where a second page had once been clipped behind the survey exception. Keira angled the jacket beneath the task light. No hidden message appeared, only an embossed file number and the partial words field verification not completed. The language matched the absence she had identified earlier. It still did not prove Halvorsen had read the missing page. One of the recovered telemetry technicians supplied the next piece without prompting. He remembered inspecting B4, 12 days earlier, and reporting that flood debris prevented a reliable sight line to the original plate. His team had recommended postponing certification until the water receded. The recommendation never returned for signature. The communications operator then produced the morning's raw relay log. It showed the crew's coordinates lagging between 3.1 and 5.0 seconds before the 5th shot, while Halvorsen's draft summary described their position as continuously verified. Vel placed the draft beside the packet timestamps and asked Halvorsen to explain the wording. Halvorsen shifted his argument. He said the evaluation schedule had been fixed by regional command, that the discrepancy appeared too small to affect safety, and that postponement would have canceled 3 weeks of training. He described the disposal order as routine records management and the restricted attachment as an administrative mistake. Keira slid the transparency over the current map one final time. The two grids, separated at B4, R, converged near the basin and opened again at the ridge by the same 6/10 that had moved her shot onto steel. Then she aligned the red routing stamp with the embossed file number on the paper jacket. They matched. The warning, the restricted attachment, the premature certification, and the disposal order now formed one continuous chain. Halvorsen reached for the jacket, but Vel sealed it first and informed him that the next explanation would be given under formal review, not across a firing table. The closed command review began 48 hours later in a windowless conference room above Moroglass Range. No ceremonial delegation arrived, and no one treated the hearing as a stage. The panel consisted of a regional safety director, a senior survey officer, a legal advisor, and Commander Elise Ward, who had temporary authority over the suspended range. 6 times synchronized displays showed the morning in fragments. The current grid, the pre-flood transparency, the raw telemetry packets, the firing authorization log, the damaged antenna, and the 6 recorded impacts at 2,863 meters. Halvorsen sat at one end of the table without his range credentials. Keira sat near the records chief, still wearing the same archive designation that had allowed him to dismiss her. The survey officer began with B4. The original plate had remained fixed above the flood line, while the replacement point B4 had been plotted 21 meters north and 1.7 meters lower without completed field verification. At the target recess, that displacement translated to an angular error between 0.56 and 0.63 mil, depending on the rounded contour values. Operationally, the officer said 6/10. The safety director then compared the relay data with Halvorsen's incident draft. The crew's position updates had lagged between 3.1 and 5.0 seconds before the 5th shot. His summary described their location as continuously verified. Halvorsen argued that the wording reflected command intent rather than technical precision, but the legal advisor asked whether intent could make a delayed coordinate current. He did not answer directly. Keira was called only after the documents had established the sequence without her interpretation. She described the fixed impact pattern, the mismatch between the two grids, and the limits of what she had known at each stage. She admitted that the shoreline marker could have shifted, that the old transparency might have contained a drafting defect, and that her first estimate of 0.6 mil had carried uncertainty. The panel noted each limitation. Her credibility came from the uncertainty she had preserved, not from pretending she had solved everything at a glance. Commander Ward asked why a map archivist had been permitted to fire the verification round. Vel answered that Keira had requested a cleared calibration point, acknowledged changing conditions, and accepted independent observation. The legal advisor then opened a restricted personnel extract. It revealed that Keira had previously served as a precision reconnaissance specialist attached to a terrain analysis unit, where she had been evaluated for rapid 3-dimensional modeling of obstructed ground. Her operational assignment had ended after a training injury and a voluntary transfer into records work. There was no secret legend, no classified kill list, and no claim that she could not make mistakes. There was only a documented skills set that Halvorsen had never bothered to examine. The review returned to the missing attachment. Records recovery showed that his office had received the incomplete verification notice at 1836, restricted it at 1842, approved the revised map at 1848, and moved the transparency toward disposal the next morning. Halvorsen said he had compressed the process to preserve 3 weeks of training and believed the error was too small to matter. The safety director placed a photograph of the shattered antenna beside the timeline. 9 meters separated that equipment from the two technicians. It mattered. The panel suspended Halvorsen's certification authority, removed him from command of live-range operations, and referred the altered retention code, incomplete certification, and misleading incident summary for formal investigation. Keira received no medal and made no statement. As the displays went dark, Commander Ward returned the old transparency to her in a sealed archival sleeve and asked one practical question. Could Morro glass be made safe again? Keira looked at the 6/10 gap between the grids and said, the range could be repaired, but only if they stopped treating the map as something the rifle was expected to forgive. 6 weeks later, Morro Glass Range reopened under a temporary certification signed by an independent survey team. Every control point had been re-verified, every access corridor redrawn, and every live-fire authorization linked to a timestamp position feed that could not be overridden by a single command desk. Commander Grant Halvorsen no longer appeared on the range roster. The formal investigation found that he had restricted the incomplete verification notice, approved an unvalidated map, and drafted an incident summary that omitted the communications delay and the disputed coordinates. His certification authority was revoked, he was removed from operational command, and the case was transferred for administrative and legal disposition under the service process. No one announced the outcome over the loudspeakers. His name simply disappeared from the daily authority sheet. Keira Solano remained at Morro Glass, but not behind the archive counter alone. Commander Ward assigned her to lead a new terrain verification course for range personnel, survey teams, and precision shooters. The order was narrow, practical, and temporary at first. It gave Keira no ceremonial title and no authority beyond the training floor. That suited her. On the first morning, 12 students gathered around the same map table, where Halvorsen had once turned the current chart face down. Keira placed the repaired range map beneath the original survey transparency and asked them to compare the grids before looking at any ballistic record. One student found the old displacement near B4R. Another noticed that the revised control point now aligned with the basalt plate above the floodline. Keira corrected neither of them until they had explained what they could prove and what they were only assuming. Uncertainty belongs in the record, she said, not outside it. By noon, the class moved to the observation shelter. Basalt Ridge stood dark above the flooded basin, its surface temperature 27 degrees Celsius under a cooler, overcast sky. The wind shifted between 5.1 and 6.0 knots, but the target recess at 2,863 meters remained fixed. A young range technician compared the live grid to the verified survey and reported no angular discrepancy beyond the accepted tolerance. The firing team prepared one evaluation round. Keira stood behind the control line with the sealed transparency tucked beneath her arm. She did not touch the rifle. The shot crossed the basin, and the ridge offered no immediate answer. Several seconds passed before the steel plate moved inside the recess, and the delayed report returned across the water. The strike landed cleanly without a 0.6 mil correction because the map had finally been made honest. No one called Basalt Ridge unshootable again. The students looked toward Keira, waiting for some final statement about the shot that had exposed the error. She slid the transparency back into its archival sleeve and closed the case. The rifle cannot correct a map, she said. Then she sent them back to verify the next one. If quiet discipline means more to you than loud glory, please like and subscribe. This story is a fictional military narrative created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real events is purely coincidental.